Steeler Fury. SteelerFury.com.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Pittsburgh Steelers show on the SteelerFury.com podcast with our continuing series of pre-draft extravaganza shows. This one is going to be about the small schoolers and the undervalued prospect in the draft. If you want to read about this year's Directional State Team, the annual collection of small school and undervalued prospects, and see some videos on them and generally find out about the sleepers in this year's draft class, then go to SteelerFury.com and you'll see the articles on the top of the page. Look for B2B Directional State 2023. And without further ado, we move to tonight's episode. Welcome again to another fabulous edition of the Pittsburgh Steelers show on the SteelerFury.com podcast. You have tuned in to the best week on our show every year. This is our pre-draft extravaganza. Tonight is episode 3. In episode 1, we did Steelers draft needs and talked about their offseason and where that left them. They're still making moves, signing wide receivers and doing stuff. And today, or yesterday, rather, we saw overrated and underrated in the draft. At the top of the draft, Korey and I gave our reviews on some of the top prospects. And tonight is the unveiling of the annual, my personal favorite show this week, the unveiling of the what I like to call the B2B Directional State Team. That's the team I put out every year for the last 16, 17 years, 18, however many years, where I come up with the undervalued, underrepresented, small school, and generally fun sleepers in the NFL draft every year that become my guys. And then when they're in the NFL succeeding, or when they're in the XFL, or when you tune in randomly to the CFL and see a guy that you profiled and you're like, hey, I know that guy. This would be the place to find out about all those characters. And to help us with that, first of all, we have Korey Karbowsky, who wasn't even alive when I did my first Directional State Team. Also, and actually, he's, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, he is the long snapper in college football at the FCS level, and he's looking for an NIL deal. So if any of you have any hookups for the long snappers, maybe it's a long distance, phone company or travel service, and he can get you there in a split second, that kind of thing. He's available, and also with us, perfect guest for talking about small schoolers and people off the map of the NFL radar. Who somehow managed to make it to the league every year somehow. This is the guy who knows all about that. He is, I think, among other things, the director for HBCU scouting. Also, he has an impressive knowledge of small schools and where they're located and what their team mascots are, let alone their prospects. And he also puts out his annual list of the underappreciated team, which is something that I look forward to hearing about. But we're going to talk about all those things with us. Bill Carroll, how are you, Bill?
This is my favorite time of year. I mean, to sort of somewhat paraphrase Coach Parcells, this is why we do all that bleed. This is why we lift all the weights, right? I mean, this is it. I mean, a embarrassingly large part of my life has been sunk into this process, and who knows what I'd do if someone paid me to do it? Sheesh. But this is it. I when I'm chasing down stuff from Clarendon State or whatever, I mean, this is why. This is the whole thing. This is it. Fairmont or Humboldt or wherever. This is it. This is why. And the thing that excites me, as you just mentioned, when Donald Parham stuck on an NFL roster, I could not have been more proud if I'd literally given birth to Donald Parham myself.
Might have been painful. He's huge.
He's very, very large. He is extremely large. And I remember when I sort of tripped across him, I was watching a player that I liked at Dayton, and Dayton was playing against Stetson. And I'm like, who is this freak that Stetson has. I mean, Stetson's usually have players that you describe as freaks, right? I mean, so they have this tight end who's legitimately 6'8" and is running away from safeties, like leaving them in his dust. And I'm like, who is this? And how is he at Stetson? How is he at Stetson? A non-scholarship FCS program. So
also right up the street from Korey, by the way.
Oh, yeah. That's the Hatters. And they had a kid named Payne, also a safety / linebacker hybrid named Payne, which is a perfect name for him because he was a hitter that I liked on that team as well. So
Bill, first quiz of the night. Where is Stetson University, and what is their nickname?
Well, they're the Hatters, obviously. That's too easy. But it's not Selmer. What is it? Something with an S in Florida? No, it's not an S. It's something. I know it's in Florida. I know it's in. It's a little bit south of the middle part of the state, I think. No, it's a little north of the middle part of the state.
It's in the middle part of the state.
Right. I know. I'm trying to remember.
How about it's in D-land, Florida, or as
D-land, yes.
Floridians like to say DeLand.
Right.
It is. Yeah, I was about to correct you, Will.
Yes.
DeLand, Florida. Anyway, sorry. Well, by the way, Stetson, just randomly, since we're talking about small schoolers, Stetson has a pro prospect this year who led FCS in interceptions, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
Named Javion Ensley.
Yep.
Who's had quite a path. He is someone that you got to love football to go through. I think this might be his fifth school. I know that he was at a junior college and a couple of other schools, and he's a really good player. But imagine to end up at Stetson, as your final destination after all of that, and being a really quality player. But
yeah, I remember once again we've talked a little about Javion Ensley, and he's obviously in this draft class. I don't have any of his pro day information. You probably do, because I was very.
Look at him nodding.
I have everything, man.
That's awesome. So that's one reason I love you. But he does really fit now what the NFL looks for in a safety. Yeah. He can cover slots. He has tremendous ball skills, and obviously he's a slightly older prospect. You're going to hear that said a lot. Because we talked about this, the COVID year guys and a grad transfer year or whatever. I don't know his exact birth date, but I know he's older. I remember I think he's 24 and a half or something. I don't remember.
He's one of those 24-year-old COVID extra year guys for sure.
Right. So
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. It's funny, this thing that we do every year where we get 20 or so participants together and select a whole team of prospects, the draft a team. If you're mad for football, I'm thinking about franchising it out, so it'll be like a thing like fantasy football that everybody does every draft season.
Right.
But I just reviewed 3 years ago, which was the first year, 2020, the first year that we did this, and I looked to see what kind of success the prospects had that were selected, and it's amazing how some of the older prospects back then were the ones that were the least successful. They got the least opportunity to be successful.
Correct.
Right? So it's not a small thing. We tend to think of it as like, you'll still get some great years out of him, and he's a good player, but that's definitely factored into the development process.
And you and I have discussed this. There are teams that have hard and fast rules about age, and some teams literally will take you all the way off the board, or if not, at least they'll take you down to day 3, depending on date of birth. See, one of the hot things we were talking about. This is not an unknown player, but Alan Hendon Hooker. Hendon is his middle name, but everyone calls him Hendon Hooker because his dad was Alan Hooker. But Alan, named for his dad, Alan Hendon Hooker, is being talked up. Some people saying even as high as 12. Right? I don't think they understand how this works. He may go in the first round, but he won't go that high. If nothing else, because of the age. People take it very seriously early in the draft. And some teams, like I said, will have them all the way, if not all the way off their board, then very much later because of the age. There are teams that one of the first things they ask, in fact, when they like a player, is their date of birth, because there's a lot of work that's being done around players' peaks, right? And it's a little different at some positions. The fact that he's a quarterback means he still has a chance to go in the first. If he were a running back, or if he were a corner, or if he were a defensive end, the first wouldn't even been in the discussion for him as at that age, no matter what he did in college. The discussion would then be more like late second into the third if he played one of those positions. Luckily, he's at a longevity position where you could conceivably, as we've just seen, play into your 40s, so that's not normal. But at least there's the opportunity to still get a good amount of years out of you. But if you play a collision position and you're that age,
right?
The NFL's like, it's been fun. Enjoy being an undrafted free agent.
I'll tell you this, though. I think it's a trend for quarterbacks. I think quarterbacks are going to come out a little bit older than they have been in the past. And the reason is NIL. They get a chance to get paid the equivalent of what a first-round draft pick gets, and then come out a year later and be a middle-round draft pick that still has a job opportunity. Right. So I have a feeling that unless you're one of the top 2 or 3 guys every year, the chances of those guys being older, like being that 24 years, going to be normal pretty soon for these backup quarterbacks. And to be fair, it's another year of them playing that they wouldn't get if they go to the NFL. They'd be sitting on the bench somewhere and playing scout team. So I don't know if it's the worst thing, but I know that I was looking at the NIL numbers for quarterbacks who are in their extra year, and it's you can see why they stayed. Like a guy like Penix or Bo Nix,
right?
That they're probably not going to be top 10 draft picks anyway. So why not stay and play a whole year and make what a first round draft picks makes for a season? So and we are far off field. It's shocking.
We are already.
Korey needs to be the person that does this. Like
I'm not going to be that one.
Wrap it up, cut it off. Yeah,
we could do that. We can refocus. We can.
Nah. Half the fun is that we have no focus on the show typically, and then you're just going to exasperate or you're going to accentuate that in some way.
Probably a little bit of both.
So, Bill, since it's my show, let me start with a guy that I really like. Korey's the person that introduced him to me. Although, as I would say, if I was in court, I would say it's inevitable discovery. Like they have in the courts. If you are in the leaders in some category and you're a transfer from a big school, I'm probably going to have a look to see, what's this guy about? So I think I would eventually have located him. But as far as I know, Korey is the first person in America in the draft Twitter world who actually saw this character and thought, this guy can really play. Wow. And he happens to be my Directional State Player of the Year this year. So he's going to get a little run in my article. But I'll leave it to Korey to tell you a little bit about Korey Curtis, quarterback from Gannon University. Bill, quick test. Where's Gannon?
Gannon is in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. I'm not going crazy. They're in Pennsylvania in the PSAC.
Mm-hmm.
And not the Dragons. That's what do you call it? Hold on.
I think they might have just changed their name.
Oh, well, that's not fair.
They changed your name. They changed your name to the Knights, I think.
I knew it was something. I knew it was something like medieval. That's why dragons popped in my head, but I knew it wasn't quite that.
And it's in picturesque Erie, Pennsylvania.
Erie, Pennsylvania, right? Yeah. Yes, Erie, the garden spot of the state of Pennsylvania.
It, man. Other than Du Bois, yes. So, Korey, tell us a little bit about Korey Curtis and what made him interesting to you.
So I'm just going to preface this with saying he threw an 84-yard go ball at his pro day. And, I mean, the moment you turn on the film, it was pretty apparent that this guy could really play. And, I get not everyone gets the D2 film, let alone D2 film that's not playoff ball. I think they only got 1 or 2 games in there. Yep. But, I mean, he has a laser for an arm. I mean, he's making throws that even some of the top QBs in this draft aren't thinking of making. I mean, we had him on for an interview, and he said, yeah, I mean, if I see it back, that's an open man. Like, if the cornerback's back is to him, he's that confident in his arm that he's putting it in. But another thing is that he's got good fundamentals. He's got good footwork. He has good pocket presence. He has the right technique in the pocket, where some guys just bail and it just drives you insane where they're getting themselves into trouble. He hangs in there. And then he's got a good frame. It's not like he's small. Nope. The knock is his age. But, I mean, he's polished. So the things that you want to look at with the age, the things that you're worried about, man, like, how long do we have to fix this? It's not a concern. It's just going to be getting up to the speed of play. And, we talked about it with Will and I. At Ohio State, he was going against 4 first-rounders in the defensive backfield for scout team. And he's, trying to play like Patrick Mahomes. He's trying to play like all these scout team QBs that for all these QBs that Ohio State has to play. And, he said, like, it was even battles. So it's the guy who I think he's going to surprise a lot of people, especially once he gets into a camp. But, I mean, I've seen no one talking about him online still, even after the pro day, except for draft day Bogle or something like that. That's his name.
Bogle, and didn't Draft Diamonds also have an interview with him earlier this year, I think?
They did.
I think Draft Diamonds has an interview with everyone, though, so I'm not going to specify them, really.
God bless them. They're great to have around, but yeah, they do seem to have it. You can always count on some Google hit for that. Bill, you remember? Did you play wiffle ball, or were you a baseball? What was your name?
I think everybody's played wiffle ball, but in baseball, I was a second baseman, a little bit of center field.
Right. Well,
left field. Yeah.
I was a pitcher. I played the other spots, but like I was fascinated with pitching and tried to get really good. But the thing that we did in our wiffle ball games is I would pitch as a different pitcher to every batter. So kind of like being the scout team quarterback and like pretending to be Patrick Mahomes and pretending to be, whoever next week. That was me pitching. So I appreciate that. In a way, the growth that comes from that, because every once in a while you do something and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like I might do that again, like for myself, even when I'm not imitating this guy. But I remember, I would do the Louis Tiant with the spin backwards, before I threw.
Yes. Your back is at 1.2 facing the
it's it.
the hitter.
If I was Louis Tiant, the receiver would be open for Korey Karbowsky. I was just, I don't know if you've actually seen any of his film, Bill, but it's not just hype because he's a small school prospect. We really think he can play.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we got quietness. Tell us about if I were to say to you the underappreciated team, who's the guy who's like the face of the team this year for you?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you're serving that one up. It's a fight. It's a good fight. I really think everyone's talked about this wide receiver class. I've even heard some people complain about this wide receiver class, which is beyond me. Beyond me. I think it's a terrific wide receiver class. But towards the latter part of it, there are some players that I think are absolutely awesome. And I think Xavier Gipson is probably one of my favorite prospects, period. But like in a draft class where I've heard people act like this isn't a great class for wide receivers, I just think it's not. In fact, two Xaviers, right? I have a couple of Xaviers I really like, but Xavier Gipson from Student of Austin is a guy I really, really like. And then there's a couple of Xaviers. Is he a smaller guy? Yes. And I guess it's one of the knocks on this wide receiver class is that there's not that many 6'4", 6'5", 6'3" types. I guess that's what people are maybe down a little bit on, but
I think that's living in the past a little. Like I don't know that that's where the NFL is going really right now. It seems like anyway. It seems real.
I think that the way that college football is going, there's not a place for those guys. There's still kids like that Bobo kid from UCLA and a few others, what's his name? Matt Landers and a few others. But the best receivers in this class are right at 6 feet and below for the most part. Quentin Johnston is probably sort of an exception, but the rest of the guys are like 6 and under. But Xavier Gipson's fast. He's got really good hands. He can help you in the return game. Stronger than you expect for a guy his size. Yeah, he's 183 pounds, but he's a strong 183 pounds, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I just think he's wildly underrated. And the team that gets him will be 14 reps. He did 14 bench reps at 183. Now, I mean, that's not mind-boggling, but I've seen a lot of guys who were bigger than 183 struggle to knock out 14 reps. So yeah, I just think he's a really good, fun little package of wide receiver. What was that?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say the thing about him is he was the man. He was like their primary target.
Correct.
For a team that's like a gamer team, like a team that is in every game, fighting hard to the finish. So I think he comes with a sort of like a little culture built in that you're not going to have to teach him. He's not going to show up at your building and be lazy. You know, like you get the feeling that he is going to work his ass off.
No.
And when the game is tight, you know, he's going to fight for every inch. And guys like that, I think, go a long way in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of his. I just think that whatever team gets him is going to be pleasantly surprised with who and what he is. And then sort of my tight end version of him is Griffin Hebert from Louisiana Tech. I can't believe he isn't getting more buzz. He is a smaller guy. Once again, I guess that's the knock. He came in a little under 6'2", which I know will, some teams will be worried about the height thing, but he's a terrific athlete. Not a good athlete. He's a terrific athlete. He might be, if not the most athletic tight end, he's certainly in the fight. He's in the top. He's amongst the top 3, probably most athletic tight ends in the class. But like I said, the size works against him a little bit. And God forbid somebody doesn't try to turn him into something like a, fullback or something, because that would be just, which is for some reason teams love to do. Oh, you're a short tight end. You're terrifically explosive. You got great hands. Let's make you a blocking fullback.
Right. If he goes to Pittsburgh, that'll happen. But no, he's one of those cats that's like, you're like, oh, this wide receiver they have is really good. And you're like, well, he's a pretty big wide receiver. And then you're like, oh, that's their tight end. That's sort of the movement skills that he has. He's a big slot. He would be perfectly fine as your big slot receiver.
Yep. I mean, he's a good enough athlete that he could just be a wide receiver if that's what you want. But he does block people act like he's incapable of blocking. I've watched his tape. I've seen him block people. He's not devastating. He's not George Kittle. No, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But have they run plays to his side where he goes out and gets somebody and, pins them in? Or he's not decleating people, but he's not getting embarrassed. I just feel like there's more to him in other phases of the game. Besides, he's a receiver. I mean, he's dangerous going up the seam. Sure. I don't know if there's anybody who's better just tearing up the seam than him in the whole class. And like I said, yeah, he's a little undersized. Like that I'm not going to pretend otherwise. He's not as big as you'd want. You'd love him to be 2 inches taller than 12 pounds heavier. I'm sure he'd love to be 2 inches taller than 12 pounds heavier.
I bet he would. Wouldn't we all? Yeah. Well, maybe not heavier for some of us.
Some of them.
Who are trying to run at 59. Korey, give us a couple of pass catchers that to go along with those two, that fine ones that Bill selected, or both guys that I believe in as well.
One that I found a little while ago that, again, not a lot of buzz, was Jadakiss Bonds from Hampton. That's a guy who just that's a guy who is a legit vertical threat. He just eats up. I mean, the 40 wasn't blazing. It wasn't like as fast as it looks on film, but he's a guy who eats up ground with the strides. So you think that you're with him, and then he runs his post, and then all of a sudden you're a step behind. Now you're 2 steps behind. And he's just tearing up ground. And on top of that, he's a physical pass catcher. Like, he throws his body into dudes, boxes them out. He does everything you want. Like, you see some big receivers and you're like, man, like, how come they don't make those catches? He makes all those catches. He catches the back shoulder balls. He'll go over a safety in the middle, yank it out from them. So that's a guy that I'm surprised hasn't gotten more buzz. I get it's Hampton, but I mean,
here's what I've noticed about Jadakiss Bonds. And like, the person he's sort of closer to, though he's not quite as big, is more like Vincent Jackson, right? Not quite as big as Vincent Jackson, but Vincent Jackson never looked like he was going fast. And then you would see people when he was at Northern Colorado. In fact, I saw him play Colorado, right? Colorado's a big school, bigger team, whatever. And Colorado's DBs consistently took the wrong angles, consistently ended up, they kept seemingly not realizing, even later in the game, he's bigger and faster than we realized. He's been killing you all game. When are you going to figure this out? So he's not quite that. Like, Vincent was both bigger and faster. Vincent ran, I think, 4.49 or something at his pro day at 228 or something, and 6'4.5" or something crazy. So he's not quite as big and not quite. Vincent, God bless his soul and God rest him. But Vincent Jackson was one of the most impressive pick a school. I mean, if he'd been at Nebraska, obviously people would have been all over him, or USC or whatever, but I loved him in Northern Colorado, and he was just unbelievably good early in his pro career. And I think he sort of tailed off due to stuff. But Jadakiss Bonds is like a not quite as freakish version. And he's utterly fearless, I think, as Korey might have pointed out. He doesn't care if you're coming with a 2x4. He's going to go there and catch the football. I've never seen him once flinch or pull his arms in. No, none of that stuff. Oh, you want to hit me? Sure. Bring it.
Well, and another to follow up, another pass catcher, Korey.
I can't go without mentioning Ryan Miller. I saw him at Hulu, and I have friends at Furman, so I knew roughly about him. There was a chance we were going to play them in the playoffs, I think 2 years ago. So we were kind of peeking at their team a little bit. But when I saw him at the Hula Bowl, I was blown away because, he gets listed as a tight end sometimes. You see him on the field. That is not a tight end. He might block like one, which is a huge plus for his game because he is relentless blocking. But he was, the Hula Bowl didn't have slouches. I mean, Matt Landers was there, Elijah Cooks. There were some dudes at receiver there, Deuce Watts. And, you look in the one-on-ones and Ryan Miller's murdering dudes. He's getting 5 yards of separation on a slant. You see him run a quick out. He's leaving dudes in the dust. And then he's got steady hands. I mean, that's one of those guys who doesn't drop balls. He kind of falls into the stereotypical, slot white guy at receiver. But I mean, he does a damn good job at it.
The whole future patriot thing. Yeah.
yeah, most definitely.
But I think one thing that, he finds a soft spot in the zones. He can beat man, especially in the short areas. But he is a monster with the ball in his hands. I mean, he runs like he's 220, 230. Like he runs a bit like he's a tight end, but then he'll bust a juke on you, and you're like, man, what just happened? I mean, he's blowing through safeties. He's running them over. That's a guy who, and again, the blocking ability, that's valuable to every single team. He got return reps at the Hula Bowl. I think that's a guy who's just going to provide a ton of value to your receiving core. He can do a lot of things. He's going to play on special teams. That's a guy who I very easily could see starting even week one.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to sound crazy, but I think he reminds me of a faster version of Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I don't know that Cooper Kupp, when he came out, I liked him and he had an amazing career, but it was very difficult to project him to where he is now because he isn't necessarily the best athlete. He's just a really good player.
He's a terrific player.
Understands how to play.
In Miller, you're getting a guy who's more athletic.
Right. But I'm saying that's a similar football sense, IQ, and is a better athlete. Right.
I mean, how crazy is that? It sounds, I don't want to, if I say he's a more athletic Cooper Kupp, people are going to have me, examined. But if you just watch him, push all the other stuff out of your head and just watch him, I could see him. Now, the situation's everything, obviously. He's unlikely to go to a situation where he'll even get a chance to play right away because he's going to be seen as, what he's going to be seen as. The thing that I like the best about him, one, as you said, an absolute brute as a blocker. And please, God, don't let someone move him to fullback or whatever. That's my most frustrating thing is when someone takes Bruce Miller, who's
we're going to get to that. When we get to the running backs, we're going to get to this. This is my favorite, rant to go on every draft season.
Right.
I'm gonna hit a couple sort of on the quicker side because just guys I wanted to mention. We talked about you were talking about a tight end, but I have a couple that are way off the median. We've drifted into the cornfield, kind of off the road, but they're both really good blockers, which is one of the things that attracted me to them, and just they're fun to watch because they're good blockers, and then they do other stuff, and you're like, wow. The first one is a little bit better receiver, but also a good blocker. His name's Julian Hill from the Camels.
The Camels, yes. In Weave Creek, North Carolina.
There you go. You know where that one is. And Julian Hill, the thing is, he's such a good pass protector that despite being their best receiver, he was in pass protection at least half the time. It was crazy. It's they could send him out and he could beat anybody, and he scored a lot of touchdowns in crunch time and so on and so forth. But they couldn't do it because their pass protection was so poor without him. I don't know if that's is it, what do you do if you're that guy? You're like, oh, this is our best pass protector and our best receiver. So they had to choose the times. I thought that was really interesting. And then Lachlan Pitts from William and Mary.
Yes.
I know where that one is. I was just there this weekend in the old Colonial Williamsburg.
Beautiful Williamsburg, yes. Where I first got to see Mike Tomlin. No, actually saw Mike Tomlin at Denby High School first, but then I saw him again at William and Mary.
Did you? Are you guys buds? deal.
I don't know. I have draft notes on him. I've mentioned that to him one time that I still have my draft notes on him. But he was. I don't think he could play in the NFL, but I think he could definitely play either arena or CFL.
Yeah, now there'd been all these leagues, he'd have found a spot. He had a little swagger. Lachlan Pitts is a bigger guy. He's sort of a classic inline play action tight end. But he's got a real fun reel of blocking highlights, which is not something that everybody has on YouTube. And he's one of those cats that's a little bit too violent for the modern game. He would have fit in. He remind me a little bit of like watching a guy like Dave Casper play.
Yeah.
And that's I think there's still a place for that, maybe even more so. Like Korey and I were discussing this last night, that running backs become less and less valuable, and tight ends become more and more valuable. That's kind of where the game is shifting a little bit. Yep. And a tight end who can do both things, who can catch the ball and do something with it, and also are really good blockers. Those guys are not easy to find.
Yep.
And just a couple quick wide receivers. One is sort of a slightly better known. He's somebody that might sneak into the later rounds of the draft. Elijah Cooks from San Jose State.
San Jose State.
Just a guy. He's a fifth-year guy. So
by way of Nevada, right?
Yeah, I think that was his first.
Nevada first. Yeah.
He, so the thing is, he's a fifth-year senior, so he's not super old, but he's also not in the second year. But he's somebody that had success early in his career. It's just he was one of those cats that really got thrown by the COVID year in terms of his, where he was and developing and trying to move schools. And so I think he needed to, with the COVID and injuries, to try to have this big year this year, which he did. And there's another guy who's obviously the dude on his team, and just the ball. He's a big receiver. You're looking for big receivers in this draft. He is one who wins every contested ball basically, and is very fast for the size receiver. Fast and quick for the size receiver he is. So I think he's an NFL player, body and style player. And then I'm going to go way off the map for the last two. See if you can help me out on this. Xavier Malone from Henderson State.
Yes.
So I know that is Arkadelphia, Arkansas.
Correct.
Now, it's Division 2 or 3?
That's Division 2, and they play in the I was about to tell you, the Great South. Hold on. It's got great in it. Great. See, it's not the GNAC. It's the Great Something American Conference. They play people like Pittsburgh State. They play people. No, do they? Hold on. No, that's not the same conference, because Pittsburgh State is in the.
They play Arkansas Tech. I know.
Right.
This is the game.
And Monticello too. They also play Arkansas Monticello. They play. Oh, who else is that conference? But yes, they have a good program. They have a consistently good program.
Well, he's a guy that is like this the playmaker. He's their their Antonio Brown. He's
their everything.
Tank Dell. The guy that's returning.
Yeah, I was a big fan a couple of years ago of a guy named Lil. They had a guy named Lil. It was like ILI''LOTT Curry. I don't know if you remember him from
Lil Lot. Oh yeah, I know him well.
Right. and Adam, right? Lil Lot and Adam Malone. Adam Morse. Were Henderson State guys I liked a couple of years ago. But yes, yeah, he's a really interesting player, and I'm a fan.
Yeah, and he has on YouTube. You can look it up. He runs sub 4.340.
Oh yeah, he's
if you're a Division II player,
yes.
might get you a little bit of attention. And another guy who runs a sub 4.3 is I'm going to lose it. Jalen Dunnigan from Olivet Nazarene.
Olivet Nazarene, which is NAIA.
That's near you or close to you anyway.
Yep.
They're in Illinois, and he's another cat. Same sort of thing. Like that style of receiver at a lower level, I'm sure is just basically unfair. But if you're really fast, if you're sub 4.3 and you can do that stuff, the thing about Dunnigan is he's a real make you just absolutely fake you into a standstill. Like he fakes guys and they fall down. He's that kind of moves in the field. And he was at the Northwestern Pro Day. He's someone that's I think on the radar a little bit. He'll be in a camp someplace. So like these dudes, for I wanted to have a shout out to some of the really off, small school places, because we don't get a lot of Olivet Nazarene action here in New York. Certainly not
you're right. Not a lot of it.
No, exactly. Give us one, Bill, for how about for on the defensive side? We haven't been over there yet.
Yes, let's do some stuff on the defense side. That's my favorite anyway. I am a huge fan of. Now here's a guy that. So there's one Portland State guy that everybody's been sort of slobbering all over, and that's Marty Mapu. But he has a teammate named Xavier Bell that I think people are somehow like, how are you not noticing they have another really good safety, right? He's not as big. I guess that's the issue.
Yeah.
But he's a really good player. And I think he can fit into some different, like Mapu is a guy that people see as sort of a hybrid, dime linebacker, whatever, while Bell is more of a, I don't want to say real safety, but you know what I mean? Like he's a, remember Quentin Michael? Like one of those guys, he doesn't set the world on fire when you're watching him, but solid.
I mean, to me, it's the versatility. He reminds me, I've seen him. I know who, what you're referring to. He just with the way they play their defensive backfield is like they just line them up all over the place.
Correct.
They all move around. It's one of the reasons that Mapu was able to be great at three levels, because they have a guy that they can surround him with that can do different.
So here's an even better one. I don't know why I say Quentin Michael, but the obvious one is right in front of me, Ryan Clark. Right. The reason that you could let Palomalo play defensive end, outside linebacker, middle linebacker, corner, slot, whatever, is because you had Ryan Clark holding it down back there. And so Bell can do some of that stuff, but he can cover slots. He can, I like this kid, and I just feel like not enough love and attention has been devoted to him, I guess what I'm saying.
It's sad. There's I guess we should be thankful, rather than that they're ignored in the draft process. We should be thankful that there's an XFL and the USFL and stuff going on for these guys, because at least there's that, and there's this backlog of talented players who just never really got an opportunity. And you can see, if you follow the XFL and USFL, at least some of these guys get an opportunity to do something that maybe gets them back in the good graces of the league, or at least gets them an opportunity in camp. So I think thank God we have that, because 3 or 4 years ago, we didn't even have that. Right. So, Korey, give us somebody on the defensive side that you think is a fine sleeper.
I'm going to give you guys Ryan Greenhagen. And, all these tight ends that we mentioned from the Hula Bowl, so Julian Hill, Lachlan Pitts, EJ Jenkins is the guy we mentioned, but I know Will likes him. Michael Ezeki. Ryan Greenhagen can defend the run. He had 31 tackles against Nebraska. That's what he's known for.
Yep.
He can shed blocks. He can do all that. But, I went in there and I was like, I know he can play the run. I wonder what he can do against the pass. And over 2 days of one-on-ones that I watched, he lost 1 rep in one-on-ones versus running backs and tight ends. And so when you're seeing him, he ran a slow 40. You look at the 40, it wasn't great. But when you see him guarding these guys on seams, on outs, on corners, on all these tight end routes that he's going to have to guard in the NFL, but he's guarding guys that we're mentioning as sleepers that they're going to get a shot. That makes you think that this is a guy who could really outperform the UDFA status that he's probably going to get just because of his 40. And this is a guy who, maybe like a Robert Spillane in Pittsburgh, where, they might not be freak athletes, but they somehow keep finding their way on the field towards the end of the year. So that's a guy who just, unless you were at the Hula Bowl or unless you got film of it, that's a guy who you can't really appreciate how good he did against some of these, routes that you would think he had trouble with. So Ryan Greenhagen's a guy that I really like.
Well, you mentioned Marte Mapu, who, I've been after him for a while, since before the Senior Bowl, when he, became sort of famous for 5 minutes. But aside from him, I have so many that I could talk about. It's like, who do I devote the time to? I think I'll give a shout out here for just a second to Calvin Avery, the nose tackle from Illinois, because first of all, he's a nose tackle or one, and those guys, people now it's like, oh, he's only going to play a certain percentage of his snaps. Who cares? And then when you don't have a guy like that and you really need him, you're like, damn, I wish we had some guys over 300 pounds. But he's a really big dude on a defensive line that's full of it. Illinois this year kind of had the Philadelphia Eagles equivalent of a defensive line where they just rotated guys in and one after the other, and they just terrorized teams. But Calvin Avery was the guy that started for them. And the thing I like about him is his coaches went to him before the season. They were like, hey, we want you to start for us next year and take a big step up. But in order to do that, you have to lose like 40 pounds because he was 385 or 390 or something. And they were like, so we'll give you a choice. Either you can move into the strength and conditioning coach's house, who's the most boring person in this college town that you live in, and you eat what he eats and does what he does, and he won't go out, and you'll have to be in prison there, and he will help you lose the weight. Or you can lose 40 pounds on your own. So he was like, gotcha. And he lost 40 pounds on his own and came and, started for them all year on a really excellent defense. If you're looking for the aha moment for him, it's when they played Minnesota, the first rep of the game against John Michael Schmitz, and he just literally tosses him out of the way in a way that you don't expect a big guy to have that kind of quickness against a really player. Schmitz is an excellent player.
So this is high praise coming from me because I had an enormous amount of love for Casey Hampton, right? Enormous amount of love for Casey Hampton. And people forget that when Casey Hampton was at Texas, he wasn't considered the best defensive tackle prospect on his team, right? That was Rodgers. Everyone thought that Sean Rodgers was the better tackle prospect. And I was like, I see why people are excited about Sean Rodgers, but give me this Hampton kid. He's shorter. He's not quite as athletic. Well, he's athletic differently, right? So Sean Rodgers was a guy that looked better on the hoof, first of all. He looked better. His body was more like what you think you want. And he could run faster, longer. But to me, Hampton had a better first step and was way better with his hands. So I was always a Casey Hampton guy, even when he was at Texas and everybody was all excited about Sean Rodgers. So I was thrilled when he ended up making his way to Pittsburgh. And I'll be honest, Will, I don't know if we've replaced him yet. You know what I mean? I don't know if really.
No, the league has sort of replaced him,
Right.
But they attack how they stop the run really differently the last 5 or 6 years. So it's, I'm not even sure they're going to add a real nose tackle this year. They added Fehoko, but Fehoko is like a guy that's 305 pounds. So the days of those guys at 330 and 340
right.
are
The Vince Wilforks,
some things like that in their front and use that a little bit more. But with all the teams playing, nickel as their base, basically it's rough.
Gilbert Brown is probably not walking through that door anymore, I guess.
No, pretty much. And just quickly, a corner, Isaiah Bolden from Jackson State was somebody that I wanted to mention because, he has everything. He has size, speed, quicks. He's got tape of playing outside, inside, and he was coached by the guy who obviously prepped, the cornerbacks as well as anybody can prep them.
Yep.
He has, 4 of them or something right now. We're all NFL prospects, including maybe the best corner in the country. I don't know about maybe. He is the best corner in the country, I think. So Isaiah Bolden comes out, and it's like whispers. There's nothing about him. And the last guy that came out of that school tore up the NFL as a rookie defender. So it's not like there's no talent coming from there. And it's not like it isn't a position where people are looking for that big corner who can really play. And he's great. We saw him, Korey and I, saw the tape of the NFLPA this year practices, and the first snap of the first team practice, he just comes out and he looks like he's in charge. He's the most confident. He moves easily. He is just completely got that confidence and quiet swagger about him. Can't say enough good things about him. Korey, maybe you want to add something.
And since we're talking about Jackson State, at that same school and getting a chance to show what he can do before the pro day, at the pro day, and throughout things like the HBCU Legacy Bowl, in some cases, you have Dallas Daniels and Aubrey Miller. Yeah, I think Aubrey Miller is pretty much a lock to get drafted. Dallas Daniels is more of a bubble guy, but
he's Martel Washington from last year. He's like the same kind of player. He'll be in the league.
And another guy who is probably a bubble guy, but I think will be a priority in draft free agent is Nugget, right? Dijon Warren. Also. Yeah. They've got some. I mean, this is to be a surprise to know. They got some players. They got some talent.
Yeah, Coach Prime, the recruiting has not been an issue.
Right. This just
Next
in,
year's even
recruiting
worse.
not
It's
an
gonna be
issue
more
for
ridiculous.
Deion Sanders.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Korey, I stepped on you.
Oh, it's fine. He's a guy who can play safety, can play in the slot. I mean, he played in the slot this year, and he's probably an outside corner in the NFL, which is what's kind of crazy. But another guy who really showed up in the NFLPA Bowl was Keenan Isaac from Alabama State. I mean, that's another guy. You see the first couple of reps, and he's just dynamic. He's lengthy, he's quick, he uses his hands well. That's a guy who's just smothering guys. I mean, that's one thing where there's corners who can have great recovery and all that, but the corner who turns down the throw in the first place is, I think, oftentimes the better one. I mean, if you're getting 1 to 2 targets a game, that's better than, maybe 4 pass breakups, but you're giving up 6 catches.
Yeah.
I always tell people that the number one job is dissuading the throw. Because if you dissuade the throw, the pass rush gets a chance to get there. And, you can't be beaten by a throw that doesn't get made.
Doesn't made, right, exactly.
I mean, maybe you don't take the ball away as much, but believe me, it's like that's way better than guys who are like, I'm baiting a throw so I can get there. No, I didn't get there this time. Like, that's not as good. I don't know who's scouting cornerback. Shout out to the NFLPA Bowl and Rick Saratella and the guys that are scouting there, because Caleb Hayes from BYU was also there. And there's another dude that can really run and play. And was Art Green there, or was he at Hula Bowl?
He was at Hula.
Or senior. But at any rate, those 3 guys that they had there at the NFLPA Bowl, Caleb Hayes is like a 4.3 guy, also super confident. He's one of those cats that he moves like a cat, like you can't even hear him move. We had a reference to that on an earlier show this week. But yeah, I was really impressed with those cats, and their cornerbacks. Those 3 guys we just mentioned there are like, what are they going to go in the 7th round undrafted? So it's a cornerback class where if you're willing to step away from the comfort zone of the Power 5 and the guys that everybody talks about in the media, which I think good NFL teams do, then those guys are going to be, having a real. They're not just going to get into camp because they are athletically to the level of the NFL and have the polish. I think they have an excellent chance to have an impact, actually, to get not just show up in camp, but actually get a roster spot at some point.
A guy that I was on, and once again, I feel like he might have, I won't say missed his chance. He'll still get drafted, but I feel like he might have been drafted earlier last year, partially because he's being younger, and also because there were more NFL scouts hanging around his program last year at Tennessee Chattanooga. Was Devonshire Marshall. Mm-hmm. And he still had a decent year, but I think he had a better year last year. And there was all the attention and heat and whatever being directed there when, of course, he and Cole Strange face each other a fair amount in practice. So I feel like that might have been,
Curtis too.
Yes, right. He's played against some pretty good offensive linemen in his career. And I feel like he's never quite gotten the love and attention he probably deserved. I was trying to bother Jim Nagy into sort of getting him there to the Senior Bowl. I wasn't quite able to pull that off, but I feel like he would have opened some eyes if he had gotten an invitation to it.
Yeah, it's funny that invite for a small school player, to make it to Shrine or Senior Bowl is such
huge.
A big deal. It's like putting money in their pocket, starting an investment account for them or something, right? Because even if they don't play that well, if they show anything, then people are like, oh, well, you can he's raw, but you can develop this guy, da da da. Right. But if he's not there, then they can't see him. And to that end, it's like my lament this year was there's nothing wrong with some of the sort of I call them more well-known late round quarterbacks in this draft, like the guys who were the quarterbacks at the various all-star games this year.
Yeah, but if you're Rocky Lombardi, yeah, right.
They could. I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
No, you're right. I mean, my issue is we know what Rocky Lombardi is, don't we? Right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, you had. Here's my rant, one of my big rants this year. The Division II talent pool, and even D3 the top guys in D3 are unbelievable. Never seen anything like it. The quarterbacks alone from D2 this year were outrageously good. And I think Tyler Badgett, who's the guy that that made it to the Senior Bowl is the third or fourth best D2 quarterback.
Yes.
So it's like why do those other guys? I mean, Corey Curtis was, I know, nothing against, the Gridiron Showcase, but it's like he was buried at the Gridiron Showcase. Connor Degenhart was buried essentially at the Tropical Bowl, which, even if you were like me and you're interested, you had to pay pay-per-view to like try to watch it on a bad production, but like they're Turner Pullen from McKendree. What's his name? Fred Payton. Now there's a guy, Coastal Carolina transfer.
Right, to Mercer.
To Mercer. And he basically has everything that the guys in the NFL are looking for, mobile quarterbacks with a big arm, and actually has good judgment. He's not a guy that it's like just throwing the ball dangerously around the field. He's good at it, and he's not running at the first sign of trouble. But when he does run, you're like, wow, that guy's actually a really good runner. Where was Fred Payton? Why did we get Sean Clifford? We got players that are not NFL caliber quarterbacks, but they come from a big program. And I know the answer is some team said they want to see that guy at 3 All-Star games or whatever he played. But it's like the opportunity loss for people who are looking to, find diamonds in the rough or find football players wherever they are. That the All-Star games really should be more attuned to finding players like that. And somebody should NFLPA has done a little bit of that, but somebody should really make a name for themselves that we are not going to have the expected players here. We're going to have better players here. So that's my rant on quarterbacks. But this quarterback class of D2 will never see anything like this again. It's like, I'm absolutely stunned at some of the quality of play. Like it just gets better and better. And, Tyson Badger, nice prospect, but man, it's like he was outclassed on the field by guys who played games against him, right?
Correct.
So how if you scouted Tyler Bagent, how did you miss the other guy?
That's the thing that drives me nuts, right? When it's like these guys were on the field at the same time. How do you come away falling in love or whatever it is, falling in like or being more intrigued or whatever term we use with the less impressive guy? And it's happened more than once. Yeah. Remember the year they invited that kid from what was his name? I can't remember the kid's name, but he was a PSAC quarterback who was maybe the third or fourth best PSAC quarterback, and he was at the Senior Bowl a few years back. And I know he was working with George Whitfield, and maybe that was the connection, or maybe why it was. But I was like, he's not the best quarterback in the PSAC. Like, how is this happening?
Well, I just think that the decision makers for things like that are not watching the PSAC. They have somebody in their team somewhere that watches those games or is familiar with those talents. But like I like to say, if you came out of the high school, someone anointed you as a 5-star or a 4-star or even a 3-star, then they keep tabs on you forever, and you'll never lose that standing unless you really mess up. But the
only thing that stood out was this kid was the biggest quarterback of the PSAC. He was like 6'3" and 3/5 or something, 6'3" and 3/8 or something. He was like almost 6'4", 6'3" and 3/8, and like 244 or something. He was a big kid, but he wasn't the best quarterback in the conference. And so,
well, I mean, I think big, people like big and fast, whether it's necessarily better,
right.
That's how that goes. Sorry, Korey, I'm gonna jump to one more thing because I have to get this rant in before the show is over. We talked a little bit before about like, don't make him a tight end, don't make him a fullback about some of these cats. Mm-hmm. Hunter Luepke.
Yes.
Let me just say, the moment that I saw the first person on Twitter that said fullback, Hunter Luepke, I was like, wait a minute. Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, I forget who. The Dante Foreman. These guys are all the same size, and they all run the 40 about the same. In fact, Hunter Luepke would not be the slowest 40 among those 4 cats. He's closer to Derrick Henry than he is to Najee Harris, right? So, why a fullback?
This is one of the few times when it's not good to be a white man in America, Will.
Hey, there's plenty of privilege to go around, but this is not one of those places, right? And it's like, I think a smart team could take him and turn him into a spectacular, versatile player who could do a lot of different things. That's great.
Mhm.
In fact, that's probably where he's headed. But I think a smart team is going to build an offense where they give him, if you're a running team and you like to have a big back, or you maybe run some pony. I think Pony. I think Pony might make a comeback with better tight ends and running backs, actual running backs, halfbacks who can block. I think that might tear up the league right now because everybody wants to play nickel, and if you can run or pass out of Pony, I think teams might have a difficult time defending that. So anyway, he's a guy that I just love his game, and he's not just a big dude who can run and catch and whatever. He's made play after play after play for a really good team, and the other teams just had no answer for that guy. I have a feeling that carries over plenty well in the NFL.
Yeah,
a note on him is that I think if he goes to a team with a running quarterback, that is going to be a nightmare to defend because he can really run the ball. So if you want to run outside zone going left where he's on the right, he can run it. Like he can get over there. But then if you want to take a quarterback power, run right behind him, he's going to knock a linebacker's helmet off. So that's going to be a situation where I think if he can go where there's a running quarterback where you can use him as a lead blocker and a runner in the same breath, then that's going to be a weapon.
Yeah. Now, I think one of the most impressive things about Lipke and the official time or whatever, consensus time, whatever you want to say, was handed down was 4.61. There were some people who had him in more like 4.58, but even if you agree to the 4.61, and that will move some people off of the idea of playing at running back, which is probably a mistake because Najee Harris, as you pointed out, was a completely healthy scratch in the 40. So what does that tell you? Najee Harris knows that he's probably not even running 4.61. But what impressed me most about Lipke, was a 36.5-inch vertical at that size, right? When you see a guy his size who has a 36.5-inch vertical, you can say to yourself, this is an exceptional athlete. When a 234-pound man can jump 36.5 inches, that means that he's got that great instant explosion.
Right.
So yeah, if worst case scenario is he ends up being, Kyle Juszczyk, then
that's great.
Right. I can live with that. Right.
Yeah. But I think he can do more than just that. That's my whole point is I just don't, I think it's a mistake. There are teams that love big backs, that love backs exactly that size, who run about that speed, and the thing is, he's got skills. He's not just a guy who's like, I'm going to fall forward into the pile.
No.
That's the thing. I think fullback, if you hand him the ball in short yardage, they're going to just head down and go, dive into the pile. And this is a cat that's way, way better than that.
Correct. Yeah.
Do you have either one of you guys got a quick running back to throw at me before we move to?
I've got a couple of small running backs I absolutely love, and one
they're not fullbacks, no.
Yeah, they are definitely not fullbacks. they're definitely at the. One of them is Toriano Clinton, and speaking of, now this sort of gives away. Indianapolis, University of Indianapolis is obviously Indianapolis, but they are the Greyhounds for those who are wondering, and he is a guy who didn't test as well as I'd hoped, and not obviously not as well as he hoped either, I would imagine. But once again, if you watch the tape, you see a guy who is a dynamic, make you miss kind of guy who has enough speed, even though he's not a burner. He plays like he's low 4.5s, even though he didn't run in the low 4.5s, I guess is what I'm saying. He would have loved to. I would have loved for him. I think he ended up running in the low to mid 4.6s, which at his size is not a great thing because he's 187 pounds. But everything else is there. He's 5'8.5". You don't love that. He's 187 pounds. You don't love that. 4.65. You definitely don't love. And he's from the GLIAC is a solid Division II conference, so he's playing against a decent number of good players. But you just would he's not going to suddenly be someone's going to not fall in love with him just based on his numbers. Obviously, he doesn't have the workout, but his production, right? They ran their offense through him his entire time there. And he needs to obviously show people in return, he can do something in the return game, because that's what's going to give him a chance to hang around with special teams. But
for a guy like that, it's all about getting the opportunity, because since you can't hand them a piece of paper that says I run 4.3, and I didn't, you can't send them tape that says, look, I played, at Texas. Then I think for guys like that, you just have to have one person that gives him a shot, and in that shot, he's got to really hit it, and that that is the hardest part for these guys. Like, I think even when you have those things, you have great tape against good teams, and you have athletic testing that's out of this world, you can get lost in the shuffle. I was just looking back, like I said, I was looking back at the 2020 draft that we did of all 500 players or whatever, and some of the players I was amazed that didn't even get a shot. Elijah Halliburton, I don't even remember him. It was a safety.
I remember Elijah Halliburton. Yeah, and
he didn't even get a tryout with an NFL team. Like, how can you be basically an all-conference safety, make a lot of plays, have a lot of numbers, ball turnovers, tackles, whatever,
all that stuff. Yeah, productive.
Very athletic testing, extremely good testing. Would have been top 5 at the combine for his position, and not even a phone call from an NFL team or any of the other leagues or anything else. Like, that guy, I think, is selling cars or something. It's like I was shocked that could happen, but that's the way it works, right? So
it happens. So every year, man.
I know a lot of the guys that we talk about here, it's really going to be about if they get the door cracked open for them just a little bit and have the kind of personality that really pays off.
The second year, I think it was the second year, either the second or the third year that we did our underappreciated team, we fell hard for a kid named Wyatt Geyer, though it's spelled Gayer, it's pronounced Geyer, people. And he's an Erlanger County deputy sheriff now. I've sort of kept in contact with him. But this guy led, I think, all levels of football in tackles for loss one year. He was a D3 guy, but a really good athlete at D3. I mean, a guy who got invited to a pro game and got to show people he was a good athlete, period. Like, he was tested well. Undersized, would have had to move from defensive end to linebacker, but hard worker, smart, super, like I said, not maybe I should say super athlete, but an above average athlete, despite the fact he's playing D3. I mean, obviously led D3, and I think he tackles, losses, and sacks. He may have led every level. I think he had 18 sacks or something like that his senior year. And, in an 11-game season, or maybe 10 or 11-game season. And then something like averaged 2.5 tackles for loss. So probably had something like 25 or 26 or something tackles for loss. So it's incredibly productive, right? But like I said, got a cup of coffee. I say a cup of coffee. I think he got into a rookie camp with the Bengals. They brought him to like a local day. They gave him they brought him back after the local day for OTAs, and then cut him. And I don't think he got picked up anybody else after that. But my other running back, before I get bogged down, is Jaleel McLaughlin, who
from Youngstown State, the Penguins.
The Penguins. But by way of Notre Dame, not the college, not the university, but the college in Ohio, Notre Dame College. Was terrific at Notre Dame College, and then decided to transfer up from Division II to FCS to Youngstown State. Also undersized, but luckily for him, he actually did really test well. So yeah, he's 5'8.25". He's 182, I believe, something like that. No,
something like that,
or maybe 192. Might have come in 192, but ran in the 4.4s. I think he had agreed to 4.46. Some people had him faster. A few people had him slower, but I think they agreed, so as people know, there's an official time at the combine. At pro days, it's an agreed to time.
Right, exactly. Like Hunter Lipke 4.57, is the time that like people were saying. And then somehow later, one crazy person had him at 4.79, so they averaged it out or whatever.
Right. It's very frustrating.
Take whatever time you'd like to take. I like it when they put the video of their drills online, because then I time it myself, and then I put that time in, and I'm like, that's what that guy is. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But no, I mean, I would like to whatever. I would like to see a better process of pro day information being collected and disseminated. But that's a whole other rant for a whole other show. But once again, despite his size, he knocked out 17 reps. So he's got strength for his size. And I think that worst case scenario, he ends up, as a guy who's a special teamer, RB4, but I could see him in the right situation, the exact right situation, getting a chance to maybe be more of a third down back or a guy that, is spelling your speed back or things like that. But I like him great.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so I'll throw a guy out there too. So I couldn't figure out for the life of me what was going on with this guy's pre-draft process. And it's Percy Ege Obase from James Madison. He didn't do a pro day. He was supposed to be at the Hula Bowl.
Yep.
He never showed up to the Hula Bowl.
Didn't show up. Nope.
So he apparently injured his Achilles. I just found this out on Draft Scout because there was nothing anywhere. You could look him up. You could go to Twitter. There was nothing online until I just saw this right here. But this is one of those things where I think you just have to trust the film. Where, I was watching the film and I remember we played JMU and he was injured against us. I think he had a hamstring thing pop up about 2 weeks before that game, and I think he came back for the later in the playoff run. But we didn't see him, but we saw him on film, and we were like, man, thank God we don't have to play this guy. And so, you watch this film, and they moved up, and they played some high-level, maybe not high-level competition. They played good competition.
Yeah,
they played Louisville. They played Coastal, and those were
amazing year, man. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you look at him on film, and, he's so patient, but not to the point where it's almost too patient. It's patient, bang. And when he hits the hole, he hits the hole. I mean, you look at his Louisville game, he's knocking dudes' helmets off. He's running safeties flat over. But then next play, bang, he's taking you inside and you're 3 yards behind him after a head nod. But I think something that, I think it's maybe even a little lacking in this running back class is running backs who can do everything. I feel like there's a ton of complementary backs, a ton of guys who will go in for short yardage, a ton of third down guys, but I don't think there's that many guys who can pass protect, run routes, and have soft hands, and then can be an inside runner all at the same time. And I feel like he's one of those guys who can do it. So even though you don't have the pro day numbers and any all-star circuit stuff to back up what you saw on film, I feel like that's a guy who could come out of nowhere in preseason, and you're like, man, how no one ever hear about this guy?
Yeah. And I mean, that's what Bijan Robinson's everyone's love for him is about that, right? Because he catches the ball well enough that he can play some wide receiver. Some people say he had the best hands of any player at Texas. In fact, I heard some people say that, the best hands on this entire squad, including, their tight ends, wide receivers, defensive backs. And he's a good pass protector, and he can run inside and he can run outside. And obviously, I think Tajay Spears, even though he's a little bit smaller, can do those things as well. Mm-hmm. And then there's a gap, and that's, I think, why Bijan is sort of so high up there, because he is 216 and can do everything. But you're right. There's a few other running backs, but there's not a lot. There are some guys who have speed. There are some guys who have power. Some who have speed and power, but they can't catch the ball. There are some who can catch the ball extremely well, but they don't want to run inside, or they will run inside if you really tell them to, but they could tell they prefer not to. Mm-hmm. And then there's some guys who only should be running inside. And, when they ever try to bounce it out, they end up getting tackled 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So maybe you should just tell them, yeah, you're right. You don't have to do that. Just stay on your track. And then there's some guys who are basically wide receivers playing running back, right? They touch the ball extremely well, but they don't do running back things all that well.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. That's the thing about the class. There's some really talented dudes, but they're usually somewhat specialized with a literal handful of exceptions.
Mm-hmm. So Bill, just quickly, because I really want to get on to the last couple.
Oh yeah.
So we haven't addressed to. I mean, it's my fault more than anything. I love this conversation, but Maurice Washington had a disastrous offseason. Nothing went right for him. He made one play at the Legacy Bowl practice that was, made highlights, and then
it all fell apart.
And it just went south for him. But there's a guy that I feel bad, because I think had things gone better for him, even just in this offseason, it was his opportunity to shine and maybe find his way to an NFL team. But now I feel like he's in danger of losing the whole thing. You have any insight in him, the former Nebraska Husker,
Yep.
who was at Grambling, and is one of the. I mean, I think Korey said when I showed him tape, he was like, I think as a runner, he might be the best runner in the class. But it's like that those days of where he was in Nebraska is now smaller, or he lost weight because he hurt his knee, or like I don't know what's going on with him.
Right. He lost, I don't know the exact amount, but I think maybe close to 20 pounds. Like he's significantly lighter than he was earlier on. So, I mean, he may need to play somewhere else for a year or two and then get the NFL, back interested in him again. But the good news is instincts don't leave you, right? I mean, he came in at 168.
There's something wrong. It's not just like he wasn't playing at 168. You can see.
No, he was playing above 190. So something went very wrong, as you just noted. I'll have to see if I can. I mean, obviously he did have a knee, but I mean, there's got to be more than just a knee.
That's what I'm saying. There's more to this story because he's a really good player. He would have, he's somebody that I would have touted as a sleeper 6 months ago, but I just, he fell off the map, and that stuff happens. Sometimes the timing is just bad. He came out a year early and it didn't go right for him. That's bad.
Yeah, very, very. Yeah.
So Korey, this is your moment. Offensive line sleepers.
There we go.
In this class, Korey may have watched more offensive lineman tape this year. Like really watched all 22. Like God bless him. And I made his life even more miserable because I keep introducing guys. I'm like, well, what about this guy? I saw this guy, and I saw this guy tested, and so he even goes through all that. So Korey, hit us with somebody.
So there's two big ones for me, but I want to give a shout out to Mark Evans II from Arkansas Pine Bluff and McClendon Curtis from Chattanooga. Those are both guys I really love, but they're not the two that I'm highest on.
Right.
So the first one I gave a little spiel about yesterday, Colby Sorsdahl from William and Mary. He is, for a team that runs the ball 20 to 30 times a game, he is as technically adept as any offensive not any, but as many of the top offensive tackles you will find in this draft. He has flawless hand usage. Yep. Even if a guy gets his hand in his chest, he's chopping, he's replacing. It's teach tape. And then he's a nasty run blocker. He's got the skip pulls down, he'll pull across the formation. He's a nasty down blocker. He wants to finish guys. This is a guy who, you turn on the film, there's a reason they're running behind him almost every single time. And then my second one, I had a little bit of inside information on this because one of my best friends in the world, he's a center at Aurora. And Chris Toth, he was a left tackle. He plays for Aurora.
Yep.
Wait, hang on a second. Bill, location?
Well, it's not far from me.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah. So just the northwest suburbs of Illinois, of Chicago, heading towards Wisconsin, but not that far. West and north. I'm trying to remember what they're called.
Is it? It's where the Bears camp is.
Right, but I'm trying to remember the what do you call it? I'm trying to remember the mascot. But I've been on their campus before, but it was years ago. I was there watching Casey Urlacher, who from North. God, what are they called again? But I was watching them, Casey Urlacher's team versus them. Brian Urlacher's little brother. The
Spartans, Bill.
Yes, of course. How could I forget?
Sorry, Korey. Go ahead. Tell us about Chris.
10 points to anyone who can say who their head coach is.
Without looking, I am not looking. No idea. Is it someone that we should know?
Don Beebe.
Oh, should have known that. You're right. Yes, Don Beebe. Who has he still has a big speed camp out in Wisconsin too. Yeah.
Yeah, the book on Chris Toth, he played left tackle. His film's almost flawless. It's tough to find a single loss. Usually you can pick apart the film and you're just fine. And you're like, when do I see this guy lose? He doesn't lose. And I should have known that because, I talked to Alston almost every day. And he was telling me probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, he's like, yeah, we have this tackle, he just doesn't lose. Like he's a freak. And I was just like, I blew it off. I was like, whatever. And then I'm going to the Hula Bowl. And I see this dude from Aurora University. I called him up meeting. I'm like, was this the guy you were talking about? He said, yeah. He said he hasn't lost a single pass rep in 2.5 years at Aurora. Not a single one. You do one-on-ones almost every day in season.
You may be too good for your level. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But so I actually think that's a guy who will benefit bumping in the guard like he did at the Hula Bowl. I don't think he's a bad tackle, but I think his frame, I mean, he's huge. He's
right.
burly. He's 6'6". I think that's a guy who's just a road paver inside. And then he had, I think, 2 losses where he gave up the inside at the Hula Bowl, but then he didn't lose once at guard. You know, they did 4 days of one-on-ones. He didn't lose one time at guard. So that's the thing. That's, I think, where he ends up. I mean, that's a guy who maybe has to adjust to the speed of the game a little. But, I mean, I would feel fine if I was looking at him starting for the Steelers as a rookie. He's so strong. He has a nasty mentality. That's a guy who's, you know, no one's talking about, but's really impressive.
Me likey.
I'll do like Korey. A couple of quick shout outs. My shout outs go to Brent Lang from Minnesota Duluth, who just seems like a really good mover at guard. And his tape does not look like a guy from some lower level that can't play or move at that size. City Sal from Canada by way of Eastern Michigan. Yeah, I think he's got a little too much attention, maybe almost at this point for like being a deep sleeper. But he is for a guy that hasn't really played all that much football to this point. Just rock solid in the one-on-ones and can move at his size. Played tackle very well, although he just profiles as a guard because of how he looks. But shout out to him. But the 2 guys I wanted to mention are further off the beaten track. One is the JD DeCenzo from Rutgers, who's been a guy that I've been all over this year. He's a guard that transferred from he was a tackle at Stony Brook. I think he played guard at Rutgers. And he's if he had gone to the combine and tested the way he tested, I think he'd be all over the news because he would be like a top 3 tester for the offensive line position. But he's got a really, really nasty disposition, which when you're a guard, I think is the number 1 calling card you should have. And he's also, one of those cats that like is just a little bit too violent and dirty for today's game in some ways. But I love that about him. Very, very appreciated style of play like that, especially when you see somebody that no one's been talking about and you watch this guy over and over again just humiliate guys and enjoy it. I like that in an offensive lineman. But the big name is somebody that's a little bit, he's touched the radar a little bit because he was a Feldman freak. His name is B.J. Wilson from Quincy, which is on the other side of the state from Bill. They're all near Bill somewhere. But B.J. Wilson, I actually managed to see some tape of him. He's a guy that was a tight end.
Yep.
And the coaches said when he first arrived in campus, they were like, how would you like to play offensive line? And he said, I think I'd really like to play tight end. That was I saw an interview with him. He was like, I said, I think I'd really like to play tight end. And they were like, we'd like you to be a tackle. And he said after a year of doing it and being really irritated that they made him switch positions, he kind of clicked and the coach was like, do you see those guys there? They're scouts who came to see you play tackle. Do you think you made the right choice? And so, he's whatever. He's enormous. He's like one of those cats that's like 6'5" plus, and in the high 330s or something like that size wise. So for a small school player, it's much bigger than expected and extremely athletic. He would have been the second best or third best tester at offensive tackle this year, right up there with Blake Freeland from BYU and Mike Witt, another guy who deserves a shout out from Northern Michigan, wherever the hell they play, I've forgotten. But BJ Wilson is another sort of like a bully with tight end movement skills and 37-inch arms, like giant paws. He's a guy that I think somebody will, they'll be intrigued to try to develop him. Whether he can develop into an NFL, tackle remains to be seen, but he sure looks like one.
So there's a guy that I really liked. I was trying to make sure he actually was in this draft class because I could find nothing talking about him. But it's Matt Armendariz from Colorado Mines. And he's really good, and no one else seems to like him but me. I can't find him on most people's rankings even. Like, so at first I was like, maybe he didn't come out, but I double checked.
He is in the class. Half testing
in the class.
Yeah.
And he's a 2-time Remington Award winner. He's a consensus first team Division II All-American, and nobody likes him. Like, so I don't know what to say to that. I'm not sure. Like, sometimes I wonder, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one who's just wrong about it. But I keep hoping that somebody, maybe the Broncos, so I bring him in on a local day or whatever, and somebody's like, oh, and they suddenly realize they got something there. But I mean, you were talking about you couldn't find anything on. He's one of those people. I mean, you can find stuff on him, at the collegiate level, but nobody's writing about him as a pro prospect. No. He may be the only football player in America in the draft class who apparently does not have a Draft Diamonds interview.
It's true. And by the way, speaking of minds, I think you feel the same way about him that I do about John Matoka, the quarterback from Mines, who is like, yes. I don't think he's a real serious NFL prospect, but he is one of the best football players that I've ever seen play the game. And I've a mad respect for him. As I wrote in my review of him, or my piece, for the Directional State article that drops today, what I wrote about him was, it's a shame that there isn't a league of regular-sized people, athletes like John Matoka to be superstars in.
That would be,
but he'll have
that's
to settle,
a great idea.
But he'll have to settle for being the best pickup football quarterback in America for about the next.
Yeah, for the sales team that he ends up on.
Yeah, right. It's a tremendous, all heart and amazing football IQ, and just doesn't really have the arm or the size to go further with it. But right. Man, at the Division II level, he was the king. So good for him. Just quickly, edge rushers. That's the one thing we didn't talk about. I'll throw it to you, Bill. Give us an edge.
There's a bunch of them, and this is a really nice class. Like, we sometimes talk about how deep it is, but I think we should talk about it more. So I really like several guys. You mentioned the Campbell Camels before, and there's a guy who ended up his career at Liberty, but started his career at Campbell.
He sure did. Yeah, I like him.
Yeah. Okay. We already know. That's an easy one.
But hit us.
Sure. So Brevin Allen, who's
no. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. He said
Campbell is also. Well, I mean, I'll do both of them.
Okay.
But since you already know who one of them is, I want to spend a little time on Brevin Allen also. So Liberty always, it's an interesting program for a bunch of reasons. I won't get into all of the reasons, but they get a lot of guys, transfers up and transfers down, guys transferring up from FCS and Division II. And they also get a lot of guys transferring down from, big programs. And so you're always going to get a interesting sort of cultural gumbo or whatever, football cultural gumbo at Liberty, of guys that are coming down from the SEC and the ACC, and guys are moving up from the Big South, or moving up from, the CAA, or somebody's, like I said, even Division II in some cases. But, there are some bigger names, or slightly bigger names, that have passed through, their program. But I also want to touch on Caleb Murphy, who actually got invited to the combine, which blew my mind.
So wait, you never actually said the Liberty player's name, Terrell Johnson.
It is Terrell Johnson, yes.
Okay.
That is Terrell Johnson. But he started his career at Campbell. And that's actually how I found Brevin Allen, right? So it was before the transfer, I was checking out this guy, and then I was like, oh, they've got another one, right? Which is one of my favorite ways to find players, when you fall in love with one guy and then you're scouting him, and it's like, oh, wait, who are you? Hey, who's your friend? It's like the Twitter meme or whatever. The guy's walking with his girlfriend, and then suddenly his head.
Yeah.
Right, sort of like that. And so I think that there's some, guys who maybe are going to find their way into day 3, and then somebody's going to be like, oh, like they realize, oh, we found something. We really got kind of a little bit, we lucked out a little bit. There's going to be about 2 or 3 of those guys I believe, at least. And they're going to find their way to, if they find their way to the right team, they'll be, guys that are special teams, situational, and then by the end of the year, they'll be seeing more and more snaps, and they may beat out, some higher priced player. By the time they come to their second year in the league, they may take over somebody's job. And so there's a few guys I think fall into that category. I believe he might be one of them. Caleb Murphy is another guy. The thing that's working against him is his age.
Fair state. Yeah.
He's another guy who I think is going to turn 25 by the time he takes or around the time he takes his first NFL snap in a real game, and that's going to be a turnoff, frankly, for a lot of NFL teams. But he is a really good football player.
Yeah, he's a good player. I mean, I think that's true for a lot of these guys who are sort of the best players on their teams, and it's something like D2, or that they're just good. They're just good football players. It's like, I think that you can be successful at that level by being a really great athlete and just be faster than everybody. And you can also be successful by just being like a really good football player, because they don't often land there. But I admire that, even if it isn't necessarily the ticket to success in the NFL as much as it is at that level. But yeah, he's if not for the age, you're right. There's a guy that definitely has some vibe. Do you want to, Korey, I have an idea who yours is, but I'm not going to say it.
So I do want to shout out the two Nebraska guys first, Garrett Nelson and O'Shawn Mathis. Those are guys who don't get a lot of attention, who both I think will get a lot of looks. Another one's Jordan Ferguson, 6'2", 271. I'm not sure where NFL teams will see him, but I will say I was standing on the Hula Bowl sidelines. That guy with Matt Landers was one of the two most talked about players on that sideline. They loved him. Not sure if he's an edge, though. Also Nelson Jordan II from Alabama A&M. That guy's really good.
That was going to be my guy, but go ahead, man.
Okay, no. That's not my guy, though. My guy is DJ Coleman from Missouri.
Oh, and that is not who I thought you were going to say, but you hit it.
It really surprises me how you can be on the other side of Isaiah McGuire, who's getting a lot of attention, and DJ Coleman just doesn't get really any love, it seems. He's really long. He transferred up from Jacksonville State, so he came from a smaller school, but 6'5", 263, he's got length, he's got size, and he's got some really legit moves. He has bend, he has a nice long arm, he's got a nice inside move, he's got some counters to his game, and then he sets a nice edge on the run. So this is a guy who really does it all, but he's got a lot of upside too with the length. And because, even though he has the long arm, even though he doesn't really have a hump move yet, which is something where a lot of guys his size really succeed with, he doesn't really have that elite of a speed rush yet, even though he's got all the bend. You really only see the bend when he's, disengaging. So this is a guy that I think he could be good now, but he could be even better later. So a team who takes seems like a stab on him just because he's not getting any attention could really reap some rewards in a few years.
Yeah. There are a lot of guys I think maybe better and more polished right now who probably get some kind of a shot to be successful. They have just a shout out to David Perales from Fresno State. Who I feel is like a really undersold player. Like, I'm not really sure why he hasn't got more attention. Had a big season this year. Once again, he's a fifth-year guy, which is probably part of the reason. And he plays, out west. Like, I tell you, man, there's the bias against players that play west of the Mississippi is real. Those cats get very little airtime, and people don't know who they are. Like, unless you are focused on that part of the country or you follow a team out there, it can be really hard to see them.
Sure.
I think he's somebody that can play. Nelson Jordan II from Bowie State, 5 sacks in the Legacy Bowl. I don't know if it's because the Legacy Bowl offensive linemen were the worst collection of all-star talent that has ever been seen, or if he was just really that amazing. It seemed like every defender in that game had a big game, but he literally had 5 sacks.
Right.
So he is a guy that, is a sort of stockier, think James Harrison more in terms of his build, but maybe not that strong. But it does feel like a guy that understands how to play at his size and use the leverage that he has and can be very, very good at it. But I'll give you one that's every so often in the NFL comes a player like in different positions, but, like a guy like Villanueva or Jason Peters, who is just like someone looks at that guy and says they have the build and the athleticism to possibly become a great player if we can get them in the weight room and we can teach them how to play and coach them up. And it's worth, a flyer. It's worth a practice squad spot or something like that. There's a guy named T.K. McClendon Jr. at Kentucky State who transferred from LSU, I want to say. He was a tight end, I think, at LSU. I think that's the school, or Auburn.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right.
And he transferred to become an edge player. So he basically he dropped down a level and switched positions. And actually had a pretty good year rushing, as an edge player. He does not look out of place playing edge. And he tested, once again, at the combine, he'd be a top 5 edge tester. So
Right.
There's a guy that has the raw tools and the size. He has length, which is something that a lot of teams really like in edge rushers. And, the bend. He's got length and bend. And there's like a basketball player kind of athleticism, which sometimes can translate really well to edge play. So there's a off the radar name I'll throw at you. So
who did you think I was saying, Will?
Oh, I thought for sure that you'd say Derek Parrish from Houston.
I really thought about it, but I
know you too well that you at least thought about it. But Derek Parrish is another guy that's he's a fullback. Make him a fullback. Well, guy's a terrific pass rusher, and had a sub 7.3 cone.
Yep.
Let's make him a fullback. Okay, I think he's going to be one of those cats. Going to be a real good special teams player. No problem getting a pro job, and maybe gets a chance to play both sides of the ball. He'll be one of those cats. But yeah, he's like a legit pass rusher with legit production and legit athleticism, and he's just not he doesn't look like the right size package.
Right.
So, he may not get a chance to do that. But at any rate, we've gone on forever, which is the tradition with this show. But I'm going to give you each a chance to throw a name before we go, because I know that it's going to burn if you're going to think to yourself, oh my God, I didn't mention blah, blah, blah. I'll start with you, Korey, because you look like you're going to cry.
Mm-hmm. So I want to, I'm going to break the rules and take 2, because both of them are former teammates, one high school and one at Southeastern. So the first guy, Cephas Johnson III, he's, freak athlete. He had, he's been actually getting some national attention. He got an athletic article. He got a Jim Nagy shout out. I couldn't go without mentioning him, but I'm going to go with the guy who hasn't been talked about as much, and that's BJ Bowler from FAMU. That is a guy who has been miscast in that defense. They play him at outside, and I'll say he's 5'6". That is an outlier even for NFL standards. However, if there's a guy who makes plays in the draft, he's him. He had a game against Bethune-Cookman where he had a pick 6, forced fumble recovery, a sack, another TFL, and I think he's one of the first players, to ever do all that in one game.
Yep.
And it's been that way since high school. He's a returner. He was a wildcat quarterback. He was a receiver. He was a running back. He was a corner. He's a safety. He's one of those guys who plays everywhere. 5'6" is a tough barrier to overcome.
Yep.
But he is a playmaker. He'll play on teams, and I think he could play the slot. Maybe not every down, but that's a guy who can rotate in, and then if he's playing on all the teams, then he could really stick.
My size is not a skill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Says Emery Hunt.
As we said.
Bill?
I'm going to, since the ropes have been broken, I'll throw 2 in real quick. So we talked about how there's a lack of really big-bodied receivers. So I have to mention Shaq Quan, a.k.a. Shaq Davis, who is a big dude. I think he came in at a little over 6'4" and about 217 or something like that. And I think that in the right situation, right place, right whatever, he could push his way into the wide receiver 3-4 realm-ish. 10-10 broad, 34-inch vert, 4'5", 140 at 216 pounds and 6'4.5". There's not a lot of big and fast guys in this class, and he's one of them. So I feel like he's going to be a guy that has a chance to be drafted late day 3. And then by law, I have to mention Andrew Farmer II. I'm sure that I would be something terrible would happen if I didn't somehow bring him up from Lane. And they are the Dragons, but
Nice.
he is a terrific football player. And I'm not here comparing people to Terrell Suggs because that's how you end up getting clowned. But he does Terrell Suggs-esque things. He's not a freak athlete, but he's a good enough athlete. He uses his hands extremely well. He rarely loses a rep. You mentioned Mark Evans. And Mark Evans, I think, blocked me on Twitter. But I like him. Mark Evans, I think, mistook my meaning when I said that, when he went on, it was probably the best offensive lineman he'll ever face in his time at Lane was Mark Evans. He had a pretty damn good game against him. And that's what happened. He didn't face him on every single snap. They moved around a little bit. But when he faced Mark Evans, he more than held his own and actually won a couple of reps, which is something. He's going to make an NFL team. I'm just going to flat out say he's going to make an NFL team. He may only be a rotational guy. In the right situation, he could be more.
Great. That's your two guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Your two guys was going to turn into three like it usually does. That's why
I decided to, since Korey did two, I decided I would pick the two off.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw two as well. Trevor Nowaski from Saginaw Valley State. First of all, now their conference is the GVAC, or is that
GLIAC? The Great Lakes.
Okay.
Yeah,
that conference is, the recruiting in that conference is insane.
It is.
Like the competition level between teams is, they are like, they first of all they go after players from opposing teams in their conference. They're like, correct, you're too good, we can't beat you, so we would like you to come play for us. There's that guy Cy Barrett or Barnett, who played for one team, won a championship, and then played for the other team and won the championship.
There you go.
And it was like a wide receiver, kicker, punter. But he wasn't the guy I was going to say. It was the guy opposite number on the other side, the linebacker, Trevor Nowaski, freak athlete. But then you see him on the field, and it's like he is one of those. If you like linebackers, you got to love guys who are like, feel like they're just jacked up and ready to play football all the time. But he's he has a little bit of that like madman mentality, but with athleticism that is NFL level. So I don't know his secret. Maybe he's just like a workout junkie, and it isn't the guy that'll translate. But I think he's someone
he'll translate. So at least the special teams.
Really good athlete. So guys like that who love to hit and love football and are really good athletes. Yeah, there's a place for them, like you said, at least in special teams, maybe more. And then I would be remiss without at least one Division III player in this setup. And I got tuned into watching the last couple of years of the semifinals and final, the Alonzo Stagg Bowl of the Division III. And so I got to see North Central powerhouse, Mount Union, the powerhouse, and the third powerhouse, Mary Hardin Baylor, who I guess I heard yesterday they're going to move up. They're thinking about moving up to at least FCS and maybe more. And there's the thought is that when they move up, they're so good that they're actually going to be competitive immediately. But there is a wide receiver. I think he'll end up being like a sort of a move tight end in the NFL, named Brandon Jordan. And that cat is like 240 pounds and about 6'5" or 6'6", and is just like the absolute most dependable. You need to play big in the biggest games that they played. He was just the guy that made plays for them. And they played some really good teams that they won the championship last year. This year they finished. They lost in the semifinals to the eventual champion, but they are. That program is amazing. There's three or four players amongst those three teams that I just mentioned. Like each of those teams has like 3 or 4 players who could be prospects if they want to play pro ball going into the future. So I like them a lot, and particularly wanted to shout out to at least one D3 guy. The running back from North Central. Do you guys? Either one of you know him? He is what's his name? It is Ethan Greenfield.
Oh yeah, Greenfield.
North Central. Yep. There's a guy that's in this draft class that it might take a little while for him to surface, but I'll bet you somewhere in the next couple of years he surfaces, and you're like, where did this guy? He'll be in the XFL or something. And you'll be like, where did this guy come from? Never heard of him. So anyway, D3 football all the way. Right,
and he's. I try to see at least 1 or 2 North Central games a year. I saw him play St. Xavier a little while back, but and that's where the aforementioned When I mentioned Casey Urlacher, he played at North Central when they went up against Aurora. But yeah, he's North Central had a really good year this past year. Also, they made it all the way to the championship game, right?
Yeah. They did not. They didn't win, right? They lost to Mount Union, but they lost in the last game. It's a really, like I said, fun football. And when you see the best teams at that level or D2 level, you think, wow, like that's better football than a lot of conferences like Ivy League have to offer. So anyway, Korey Karbowsky, long stepping away. You're headed into your off season, and you're already on NFL radar, as we know from Bill following you. So if he's following you, there's a scouting portfolio on you somewhere. And I, of course, will be scouting long snappers for the next couple of years.
There you go.
Just to be ready for when you come out. And Bill Carroll, as always. Bill, what do you have coming up for program? You got anything exciting happening?
Oh boy! So there's a lot coming up. Articles, obviously. I've got a bunch of videos I'll be dropping on Zinni 62 Media today, tomorrow, the next day, up until the draft. Basically, a video or two every day. I've got a couple of articles I'm working up for Team MBS Sports, including one about the S2, which is the big thing that everybody's all goo goo gaga over, and what it is and what it isn't, right? So I hear people describing it in ways that are not what it is. The good news is that it's not the Wonderlic. That's the good news, I guess. Yeah. But I hear people sometimes talking about it as if it measures intelligence or things like that. And it's not what it's intended to. It's not what it does do. What it does, however, measure is certain types of pattern recognition, right? Certain types of pattern recognition, tracking things, how you visually sort things like that, which can still be very important, but I don't want people thinking it is what it isn't. I'm going to, once again, my blue light specials, which is what I call players that I think are available as day 3 or even undrafted free agent players, but I think will stick. And some of them we mentioned here tonight. So they'll be dropping on Team MBS Media throughout once again, at least 1 or 2 a day, 1 on offense, 1 on defense, so 2 a day until the draft. And of course, the cherry on top of this coming up this weekend is the 9th annual Mock Draft Palooza with not exactly fabulous prizes, but prizes awarded to the top 3 drafters. And I'm particularly proud of the group of the blue-ish ribbon panel of judges I've managed to put together. Met some people at the combine, talked to them, managed to trick them into saying yes to judge this upcoming mock draft Palooza. So if you're interested, there's still a couple of teams available. It is, so if you find me on Twitter, hit me up, but it is 3 days of 7 rounds of live mock drafting, and then we'll be judging afterwards. And then about 24 hours after it's over, we'll announce the top 3 winners, and they'll each get, I don't know, maybe a gift certificate or a signed, it might be a signed football book by a friend of mine who's one of my favorite football writers I ran into once at the combine. So we'll see what the prizes are, but there'll be some fabulous-ish.
And Korey and I will be GMing in this, and I'm sure we'll be appearing in the broadcast to
yes, you will
try to explain the picks that people made that we don't understand. And
yes, correct.
That kind of
there'll
thing.
There'll be lots of opportunities for that. That's half the fun.
We got blasted for the George Pickens pick.
Yeah, we picked George Pickens in the first round for the Steelers last year. I think we did all right. So
you did okay. If you'd just gotten him around later, nobody would have had a problem, I guess. But
I'm still fine with the choice.
All right. You did fine.
Okay, well, once again, Korey, Bill, thanks for being with us. Hey, those of you, if you made it this far, first of all, you are a diehard draft aficionado, or you fell asleep while the podcast was playing. Either way, thanks for sticking with us here at Steeler Fury. And we're got more shows to come. We're going to have replay tomorrow the interview with Corey Curtis, the quarterback from Gannon via Ohio State. That is my small school and undervalued player of the year.
Yes.
Tremendous interview. In fact, not everything made it into the interview. We're going to talk to him again because he's a really interesting guy to talk with and a great sport about being interviewed by a couple of schlucks like us. And then Friday, for you Steeler fans, we are doing a Steelers mock draft war room where the 3 of us will try to sort through every, debate possible choices and select a player at every slot in the NFL draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have done that every year now for like 18 years. And it's usually a bloodbath that works out okay in the end. And we all shake hands and have a beer. So at any rate, tune in for that the next couple of nights. All kinds of draft content for you. That's all we do this week. We get it out of our system so that when the draft comes, we don't have to do this anymore. We can go back to our wives and girlfriends. And
Yes.
so at any rate, thank you again for joining us on the SteelerFury.com podcast.
Yes,
you can
and
subscribe wherever podcasts are sold. Hit the like button, send us a message, make a comment, and see us next time on the SteelerFury.com Pittsburgh Steelers Show podcast. Hey, if you like the conversations tonight, don't forget you can go to SteelerFury.com to see the article about this year's Directional State Team of small schoolers and undervalued prospects. Read about them, see some videos. It's probably the best resource for learning about small school sleepers, players that are under the radar. If you're into draft sleepers, that's definitely the place to go, SteelerFury.com.
Steeler Fury. SteelerFury.com.